everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Old, the New, and the Awesome. I, of course, am Steve, your friendly neighborhood lawn gnome, reminding you that when it comes to this amazing show, we only shoot the shit here and we don't shoot the messenger. And, of course, my day over here on this show is not complete without my co-hosts, Kami and Stacy. Ladies, it's great to have you back, as always.
Good to be here.
Yeah, so I don't know about you guys, but it was definitely it was a challenging month. It was just so many things were happening on YouTube and off YouTube, and I am just happy to say it's just good to know that we are here together talking about everything that we want to talk about and that we've all survived. Now, I don't know how the rest of the summer is going to go down because the heat is apparently coming at us this year with a vengeance. I'm listening to what's going on in the northern part of the United States, and there is a massively humid cloud floating over the Northeast right now, and it won't be gone until Wednesday. So the only thing that I'm hoping for is that everybody just stays hydrated, doesn't work themselves as hard as they have to, and hopefully if you've got air conditioning, it will last throughout the next couple of days.
I live on the Hellmouth, so I genuinely think that no matter what comes my way, I will survive. So this is why I'm fully prepared for the zombie apocalypse, because I know I can stand triple-digit heat. My hottest temperature this month has been 118 degrees. I'm still standing.
That is horrible.
I gotta be honest, Kami, I've only been to Arizona, where you're from, once in my life. And I will say that when I went outside and went for a walk in that heat, because of the fact that it was dry, it was not a bad experience. Yes, it was hot, and yes, I had to stay hydrated, but I didn't feel like there was an extra 10 pounds like throwing me into the pavement because there was no humidity. Like, I can't bear summers in Florida.
It's awful.
And
it's like breathing through a dirty gym sock. Like a dirty, wet, sweaty gym sock. That's what the humidity feels like. It makes it hard to breathe.
Yeah, and I will say...
That's why I love it here, because you're absolutely right. And I think a lot of people don't understand the difference between a hot heat like in Texas versus a dry heat here in Arizona. Like, it's hot, yes, but you stand in the, you stand in the shade and you have no idea it's 120 degrees outside. You're like, oh, okay, it feels like 95, you know? So there's a big difference between a dry heat and a humid heat like you guys are referencing.
I mean, being here in New York, even though I'm very far from the city where I live, when I go into the city, I mean, I haven't gone to the city for work in quite some time, but when you go into the city in the summertime, especially if you have to actually wear business casual clothing, when you're in the confines of the city limits, the pollution and the grime and everything else just makes the humidity so unbearable. And if you have to go into a New York City subway, forget it. I know that you use the gym sock reference, Stacy, but I always say it feels like the inside of a fat man's pants. That's what I say. And God, I hate summers in New York City. Though my wife and I are actually planning a trip at the beginning of August. We do actually want to go into the city and check out the brand new Harry Potter experience store, because we've been hearing some really cool things about it. So we are excited to get there one day. But yeah, right now, what I'm sort of happy about, and I know it's probably not going to make much of a difference, is the fact that yes, it's sticky, it's humid outside, but there's a cloud canopy, like it's overcast. So the fact that it's not bright blue skies and the sun has nothing blocking it, I sort of feel that there's a tiny little layer of protection. So it's probably unbearable, but not as unbearable as it possibly could be. So I'm hoping that the overcast just sticks with us for the next 2 or 3 days, along with a couple of thunderstorms here and there. But just knowing that what we're going to be getting for 4th of July weekend, I'm like, you know what? I think we could do this. So
yeah, I have no plans for 4th of July other than just to drink water because it's still in the triple digits here. It's still hot, and I try to avoid the outside at all costs. But then it's nice to kind of be a horror aficionado because vampirism is kind of my thing. I just go out when it's nice and dark.
There you go. But in regards to big news that happened, we're not going to talk about anything that's actually been going on in the real world. I want to talk about something really, really wonderful. And Kami is actually a part of it. And even though you are not, Stacy, we are hoping that one day you will check out a couple of the episodes. Kami and I and a couple of our friends just launched a brand new YouTube channel called That's Comical. It started out with my discussions of comic books, with my monthly wrap-ups on my own YouTube channel, which earlier this year turned into a discussion show with a few friends, and deciding to take a chance and bringing on more people, including Kami. People were just saying this is something that could be bigger and better, and said that this is not a show, this is a channel. So That's Comical is officially launched. It is now officially up and live. Social media handles as well. We just had our big premiere episode launch last week, and I gotta say that it was such a fun experience. I was just hanging out with one of my friends who works on the channel with me, Andy, and we were talking about the conversation and just talking about how much fun it was and how many more he's looking forward to. And Kami, just want to let you know, not a day goes by when Andy and I are hanging out that the Justice League discussion that the three of us had is talked about. We always talk about it because we still cannot get over how awesome that conversation was. Speaking of which, they officially announced the US Blu-ray release date, Zack Snyder's Justice League, September 7th, everybody.
I'm so excited. You have no idea. I cannot wait to get that in my hands because I'm going to probably wear that DVD out.
I want to know what the special features are. I'm excited to see the special features. So
I think that's where everybody's at that is really excited about it. We just want to know what extras they could have added on a 4.5-hour movie.
Yeah, exactly. But it's 4.5 hours that go by so quickly you don't even realize. But anyway, speaking of That's Comical, there's a specific movie that I know that Kami is dying to talk about because it actually just got released on Blu-ray and DVD this past week. And Andy and I were hanging out yesterday, and he actually said to me, "Hey, Steve, do you want to watch The Long Halloween Part 1 today?" I was like, sure. So we watched it, Kami, and I know that you and I have a lot of various videos about this specific storyline, whether it's in the comics source material and the movies. We got a lot of treats coming over at That's Comical, but without any major spoilers, have you seen it, and what were your thoughts?
I have. I was very impressed with it. I really am just more impressed with the comic. I don't think I've ever fell in love with a comic book the way that I fell in love with the way that was written. It was just so poetic and so dark. And there was noir feels to it, which you know I love being the horror buff that I am. It honestly gave you a little bit of every character that you love and or despise, depending on where you lie in that spectrum, in the Batman world. So yeah, the movie, it did it justice.
Yeah, Andy and I were very impressed when we watched it. There were obviously a couple of changes for cinematic value, but they still worked. We thought the animation was absolutely gorgeous. This was one of the most unique Batman films that I've ever seen. Very noir. You don't really see that many noir Batman stories. I think the last time that one of those animated movies really hit it on the head was Batman Year One, because Batman Year One is a very noir story written by the great Frank Miller. So yeah, let's just say that we're excited to talk about the comic. We're excited to talk about the movie in greater depth. We're excited to compare the comic and the movie. And of course, we're very excited for part 2 in August.
What is the movie you're talking about?
Yeah, I can't wait.
It's called Batman The Long Halloween Part 1.
The Long Halloween.
Yes.
Okay.
It's based on a comic that was made in 1996. It's a Batman comic, 13 issues. It's easy to get on trade paperback. People call it one of the greatest Batman stories in comics ever told. And of course, when the DC animation people take on a project in the world of DC animation, especially when they are going to use some comic book source material, people really wonder, especially when they're taking a really beloved story, what are they going to do, and is it going to be good compared to the original source material? And I gotta say, I was very, very impressed.
Kami, where did you watch it? What was it on?
I purchased the DVD. You can buy the DVD or Blu-ray at Walmart. You can also get it on Amazon. Amazon, you can get it almost next day. I think I got mine in 2 days. But Walmart has it on the shelf in both DVD and Blu-ray. So yeah, I highly recommend picking it up, Stacy, because even if you're not a huge comic book fan, even a Batman fan, I think that the amount of darkness that's within this depiction, it's perfect for anyone that loves a noir, anyone that loves kind of like a crime drama. There's a little bit of something in it for everyone. And even if you just have a little bit of Batman knowledge, you're going to get a little treat with all of the different characters that are interlaced within this story. I mean, there were many times reading it that I was just like, oh, this happens, and then this happens, and it's a beautiful treat. And being a prodigy of the 90s, having loved Batman the animated series, that was a very dark and gritty cartoon, and I didn't realize it watching it as a kid how dark and gritty and almost not necessarily R-rated, but there was just some very suggestive adult content within that cartoon, and I didn't realize it until I was much older. And I really got that same feeling reading The Long Halloween, and then now having seen it, it does have that, again, the noir feeling, the darkness, the grittiness. It's fun. It's a lot of fun. For as much violence as that takes place within this story, there's just enough wholesomeness that kind of outcomes from the back end. And you really do get a sense of a deeper understanding of some of the characters. So I think it would be highly enjoyed by you.
And one
of my favorite cartoon series is the Batman cartoon, so I think I would like it.
I also want to throw out a couple of additional things for you. If I don't know if you have HBO Max, but I'm also not sure if it is on HBO Max right now. But also, if you want to read the graphic novel, it's a very inexpensive book to get. It ranges right now, I think, somewhere between the $10 and $15 range. But also, if you have HBO Max, you should take a look at the DC animated film library that you can actually watch on HBO Max, because the thing that's great about this library was it's been originally incepted in 2007. That's when they originally started doing these animated films. This was also when they started raising the bar. A lot of these films are rated PG-13, and a lot of them more often now are starting to be rated R. The Long Halloween Part 1 is PG-13, but the Long Halloween Part 2, which is coming out in the middle of August, already has a R rating. And it's just great to see these creators who gave us Batman the Animated Series and Superman the Animated Series and Justice League and Static Shock and Batman Beyond, all this stuff. It's just great to really see them trying to connect with the fans who originally watched them and got older. Just knowing that this DC animation is something that you can carry on all the way from childhood through adulthood is just a wonderful thing. And yes, even Bruce Timm, who gave us Batman the Animated Series, has come back a couple of times to produce some of these animated films. If you want to see one of the animated films in this library that is unlike anything that you have ever seen before, I highly recommend Justice League Gods and Monsters. That is just a movie that will change you as a DC comic book appreciator or just a DC animation fan. And also, if you're a Supernatural fan, you will probably love Batman The Long Halloween Part 1 because Jensen Ackles is voicing Batman.
Oh, okay. I'm totally sold because I love him.
Yes, he is voicing him. And
if you want to read it, Stacey,
I don't like read it, Stacey. It's just because it's too distracting for me. I have a hard time focusing on it.
Right.
With all the pictures, with my ADD, it's just distracting.
Okay.
It's hard.
Yeah. But yeah, you've got Jensen Ackles, and you've also got Josh Duhamel. He's also a voice.
He's hot too.
So there's some good voices in this film. So definitely very enjoyable. They always get great voices in these animated shows and films. And one of the other things that I always say to people, a cute little Easter egg, is one of the few things that DC Animation is known for is the cast of Firefly constantly lends their voices to some of these characters. I mean, I can't even count how many times Nathan Fillion has voiced a DC character for this animation studio. Yeah, but almost all of them, only one Firefly cast member has not lent her voice. And it's so upsetting to me because Jewel State is Kaylee on Firefly, and she's my favorite character. So I'm so upset that she hasn't voiced a DC character yet. But along with that, I've actually been watching some other comic book shows, and I actually just finished the 3rd season of The Tick. So now I'm officially done. And I gotta say, for series finales, that is one of the best series finales I've ever seen. And for a kid's show, that just speaks volumes. But I am currently rewatching an animated show that left us way too soon, and that is Avengers, Earth's Mightiest Heroes. This is awesome. Kami, if you loved the X-Men animated series and the Spider-Man animated series from the 1990s, this show goes right there with them. It came out in the early 2000s. It's so much fun. And what I loved so much about this animated series is you got to learn so much about a lot of the Marvel Rogues Gallery of villains outside of the X-Men, which is what a lot of people love. I mean, that's what I love about DC animation and Marvel animation over the last couple of years, because they gave us the opportunity to be introduced to so many other rogues galleries. Because it's like, when you think about DC, you can name at least 10 of Batman's villains, but there's a very good chance that you probably can't even name 5 of Superman's, or possibly even 3 of the Flash's, and probably none of Wonder Woman's. But because of these DC animated shows and films, we've gotten to learn and meet a lot of these villains. And the same could be said about Avengers, Earth's Mightiest Heroes. You know X-Men Rogues Gallery, but you don't know many that belong to the Avengers. Not just the Avengers themselves, but like individual Hulk villains, individual Iron Man villains, individual Captain America villains outside of the Red Skull and Baron Zemo. You don't know many of them. And unfortunately, the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the DC Extended Universe are not going to help you that much. The animated series are what does it. And I also watched, ironically, another show with Josh Duhamel in it. I watched the Netflix show Jupiter's Legacy, based on the Mark Millar graphic novel. I have to admit that I was impressed with what I saw. It actually ended up being a little bit better than I thought it was going to be. I mean, look, it's nowhere near The Boys or Invincible or even Castlevania, the animated series, but unfortunately, Netflix canceled it after the 1st season. And it was a real shame, because I really thought that the show had potential. If you could have just given it one more season, it might have actually worked. However, I'm also kind of not surprised, because one of the few things that this show did not do for me is it gave me no incentive to want to go out and read the source material. So I really have no intentions to read any of Mark Millar's comics. Even though I know Mark Millar as a creator, I have some of his work. He's written one of the most brilliant comic books in the 21st century, and that, of course, is Civil War. But I have no interest in Jupiter's Legacy outside of the TV show. I might rewatch the show, but it's a pity that it got canceled.
It's a bummer.
Yeah.
I heard a lot of people didn't connect with it because it was really slow.
Yeah, it is a slow burn. I'm not going to deny that, but I gotta admit, sometimes I do like a good slow burn. I mean, look, Batman The Long Halloween's a slow burn. That's a very good slow burn.
I agree with you, but I think that you kind of have to separate the comic enthusiast and the avid comic reader with the comic moviegoer, because Marvel and the Marvel Cinematic Universe that was created a decade ago has changed the way comic goers go to the movies. They want the big name tickets, they want the action, they want the CGI, they want all of this extra. And when you give them something like Jupiter's Legacy that's a little bit slower, that doesn't have all of this extra, it's not $1 million production, people tend to be very critical. And it's sad because there is a lot of beauty that can come out of something that's a little bit slower paced. You know, you get a little bit more connectivity with your characters, you get kind of a more intimate relationship development in terms of understanding them or their backstory. And people are just so quick to judge, you know, if it doesn't have this $1 million budget behind it. And it's unfortunate because then you get shows that don't really get to get off the ground, where this particular show kind of ended. It was just beginning in a sense, you know?
Exactly. And I also have to throw out Zack Snyder because he's a perfect example of someone who is making very good comic book based films, but clearly it's not something that's being made for the mainstream moviegoer. I mean, look, 2009's Watchmen, I think, is the greatest comic book adaptation of a comic book into film. I think that Zack Snyder truly created a masterpiece, but it's a slow burn. It's not all fancy frills and a mile a minute action, but also that's the graphic novel. It's a story that was created by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons back in the 1980s to basically go against the grain in regards to everything that people perceived as a comic book, and turned it into something so different, smashed barriers, did a whole bunch of things that nobody even knew. And I think the best part about it is how many times they were able to work around the comic code. Because for crying out loud, there's a naked man in the pages of those comics. There's a naked man in the movie. Why is there a naked man in Watchmen? Because the comic code said you're only not allowed to draw a naked woman.
I'm okay with that naked man. I didn't mind it.
No, I think I compare now being more of an avid comic book reader, being a comic reader and a moviegoer, to that of the same in the horror genre, because you get so many people that give you backlash about reading horror novels or books because they don't like horror movies. And I tell people, don't compare oranges to apples. And I feel the same way about comic books and comic movies, because your comic book movie adaptation usually is a far different depiction of what you're reading, because you can't necessarily translate the pages to a film. You're going to have to make some variations in certain places. And I think that both can equally be loved, but they can also both equally be appreciated for what they are and what's developed. And so I tell people, don't go into a comic movie expecting what you read, because you're going to be in some places disappointed, but in other places surprised. And you know, the same thing happens in horror films, is that everybody thinks every horror film that's ever made is a slasher or some gore fest. And that's not the case. You have different genres of horror books, just like you have different genres of horror movies. So I think that the average moviegoer sometimes dips into this novelization world, and then vice versa. And then you get these people, because everybody has a camera or a phone with a video, you know, a capability nowadays, that are doing these reviews, and everybody's a critic, and you get a lot of misinformation that's thrown out there because of the size of someone's platform. And it's sad, because I think in a lot of ways people aren't watching the people that they should be, that are really well versed in the history of comic movies or comic books, that can give valuable information for newbies out there, or someone that might be kind of middle of the road, experimenting with the different available, you know, movies or genres out there that are for them. And then they go in with this kind of already a made-up mind. And I hate that. I hate when people watch reviews before they go and experience it for themselves, because they have all these thoughts in their head that someone else has. And a movie and a book should be very personal to you. It should be an experience that you're having, and you should have thoughts about it. But we're so inclined now as a society to get the juice or the tea or the information from somebody else before experiencing it for ourselves, that we're often just regurgitating somebody else's thoughts. I couldn't tell you how many times I've watched a review that's almost carbon copy of something that I just saw, because they're just taking information to put their video out first or to get likes or hits. And I'm like, did you even watch it? Like, do you even know the history of this? Do you know anything about this prior to just watching this? And I realize that we all have a million other hobbies and interests, so you're not going to be able to go back and watch 40 movies to be able to explain this one. But I just, excuse me, but I just wish that people would take a little bit more time in like kind of assessing what it is to be a critic, what it is to kind of throw information out into the universe before they do it, you know? I think a lot of things get ruined that way because people trust in people that really don't have a lot of basis for comparison.
Kami, you're someone that hasn't been reading comic books for long, but my God, you sound like you've been reading them for 20 years. I can't believe this. I love it. I love it. But you know something? I have to refute you just a little bit.
Thank you.
I actually have to refute one thing that you just said, because when it comes to me actually watching reviews of a movie before I see it, I always like to do that, especially if it's a movie that I have high expectations for and there's a lot of people that are saying it's not good, it's not good. Well, that only gives me the incentive to go see the movie so I can prove you wrong, because
That is exactly why I do it. If more people say they hated it or they have a million reasons why it wasn't good, there is a good possibility that, you know, there are some bad things out there that are created. Don't get me wrong. But if somebody tells me not to, I am more inclined to do it just to prove them wrong. Just to say, how did you draw this conclusion? Because this, and this was right. And again, it goes back to your platform, your basis of what you're going in with. You know, I think a lot of the way that I read, interpret, and or view things are based on things that I have watched from previous years, and I have such a repertoire and such a different basis of comparison. You know, I will watch things that are related that you wouldn't even know are related because I do so much behind the scenes research. You know, what was the author thinking? What was the author reading? What was the director watching? Who was the director working with? You know, so all of these little tidbits help me to kind of fall down the rabbit hole, so to speak. And so when I'm critical of something, it's because I've done a ton of research, but this is also a catalyst for me because it's so much longer to do research. It takes me 10 times as long to get the information out there because I'm doing all this extra stuff. But on the same token, I feel like when I'm talking about it, I'm giving justice to the people that are watching me talk about it because I've done so much homework, you know? So
That's
yeah,
awesome.
I totally agree with you, Steve. I don't think reviews are bad, so I don't want to say that they're bad. I just think that you need to know your source that you're getting it from.
And it's not just that, it's also because of the fact that that's what makes us the people that we are. I mean, when you and I and everybody else over at That's Comical talked about collecting, I told people that, you know, my parents were okay with what I was doing, but they just didn't understand the whole concept of me collecting things. It's because I'm the type of person that wants to really go into it just beyond what I just sat and watched. Like, I want to see what was going on in the director's mind. I want to know why this person was cast for this role. I want to know why, if this was based on the source material, why was this change made? Why was that change made? I mean, look, I could have easily gone and picked up a DVD copy of Raya and the Last Dragon. I haven't watched it yet, but I'm really excited to review it because that's going to be the 100th episode of Out of the Vault on my channel this coming month. So excited. But there's a special feature on the Blu-ray that just intrigued me, and it was, how did we make this Disney classic during the pandemic? How all of these animators and staff members did this in the privacy of their own homes and communicated through Zoom. I need to see how this happened. That's just so cool. And that's going to be a true testament to what we endured in 2020. It's going to be something that just sticks out there.
And it's nice to have something like that encapsulated. It's kind of like a small time capsule, you know, that you can go back and you can look. I was there in a sense, and I was going through all of these things. So just to kind of see how the mind of a specific specialist can work in those conditions, you know, it must be incredibly difficult. I watched a couple of videos of bands that did that, you know, where the band members were at their respective houses with their small studios, working with whatever equipment that they had. And then they had to like send each other their videos so somebody could edit and piece all of that together. And it's incredible, the music that came out of the pandemic. But that same notion, I always compare in the horror movie industry to The Shining, because The Shining is so hated on because Stephen King himself hates The Shining. But if you get into the mind of Stanley Kubrick, that film is genius for its own reasons, and it doesn't necessarily correlate 100% with Stephen King's vision of his book. But if you understand why Kubrick did what he did, that film is cinematically beautiful. You know, there's just so much that comes out of it, but that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, we're going to have that conversation, because I am not a fan of Stanley Kubrick. I do not like The Shining as a film, and I do not like The Shining as a book either. I was bored to tears with The Shining, but that's another story for another time.
I like The Shining movie more than the book.
Well, that's just because it's Jack. I mean, how could you go wrong with Jack?
Well, in his book, Stephen King, it was one of those things where he really needed to cut out, 100 pages. I was bored in the book because he would talk 100 pages about, Jack's father, who was a drunk. And I'm like, I get it. He was a drunk. You can stop talking now.
I got to be honest, I know that Kami's a Stephen King purist, and I know that at some point we're going to talk about Kami's experience with The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, in just a second, but I agree with you, Stacy. Look, I think that Stephen King has some real gems in his collection. Like I say to people, it is my favorite Stephen King book of all time. But reading some of his books, I think that one of his biggest problems is he just writes too much. Because I had to slog through the last couple of books in the Dark Tower series. I loved the first 3 books. And the 4th book being 1,000 pages, it still is a great backstory, but oh my God, 5 through 7 was so hard for me. I didn't think I was ever going to finish that series. And he just writes too much. I think that that's his problem. I don't have anything against people who are trying to create characters, trying to develop atmosphere, trying to create beautiful worlds unlike anything else. I mean, in the world of comics, that's what Jonathan Hickman is all about. He's currently writing X-Men books, and there's been a lot of backlash because people are saying, what is going on here? What are you leading to? Because it's just taking too long. That can make or break. But if you're gonna really want to develop, you gotta just work smart.
I'm biting my tongue here because, I completely disagree with that.
I know.
I absolutely love Stephen King's writing. I think that despite the fact that he does get a lot of flack for the length of his books, I think that it is necessary. I think that so many people try to encourage Stephen King to write less, but you have to understand Stephen King is not of our generation. He isn't of a generation that we really didn't have a lot of movie go-to. So your book was your movie. And in order to captivate your audience, in order to get people to be sucked in and immersed to some of these stories, like The Stand, I will always speak up for The Stand because it is a loved book, but the first thing people say is it could have been 300 pages less. And I disagree. When you are building an apocalyptic world and you have 40 different characters that you are following their lives, and there's a beauty to it. And I think that you really need to get into the rhythm of a Stephen King novel because, like The Stand, a lot of your characters are paired. You will read chapters that are dedicated to a group of characters, and those characters will follow each other and their lives, but they beautifully combine in some way at the end. And you need to know about the air. You need to know about the quality of the food that's available. All of this is very important. But if you are the type of person that is in the mindset of today, everything needs to be now, just get to it, give me the meat and potatoes already, you're going to get frustrated. And I think that we are just so so programmed now. And I think programmed is a great word to use because we're so technologically keyed into everything that everything is readily available for us at our fingertips. And so we want everything now, and we can't wait. And I think the beauty of Stephen King's novels is there is a buildup. There is some things that you kind of have to slodge through, as you said, but when you're done, it all just so magically works together. It's like building a quilt, you know, you see all your patchwork and you're just like, wow, that's beautiful.
No,
so
yeah,
I will forever defend the length of a Stephen King novel. I will forever say that it's needed, despite the fact that, yeah, some things are very overly detailed, but I think that in the end, those little nuggets that he gives you connects you to another piece of Stephen King's world, because so many of his novels are interlaced. And I think people forget that you will revisit some of these characters somewhere else in the world of Stephen King. So
no, that is true, because I know
that hill.
That
I'll
is
die
true.
on it.
That is true, because I know that there's a lot of references to Salem's Lot towards the end of The Dark Tower. But again, you're right, because when I finished book 7, I did think that the overall story, all 7 books, I was satisfied. I also will say that it, as a book, should not be shorter. It is a perfectly done story. Even though it is over 1,000 pages, it is a story that captures you. It's a story that moves. It's a story that really develops the characters. Those characters are developed perfectly in Stephen King's It. I want people to know that. But that's all. So, Kami, tell me about The Conjuring. I've never watched any of these movies, so this is the newest one.
Don't give any spoilers, because I'm going to watch it, and I just
She
haven't
will
had a chance.
not. When has Kami ever spoiled you, Stacy? Besides spoiling you rotten as an ultimate friend.
Right? Yeah, The Conjuring is like my favorite horror franchise, so I don't want to know, and I'm going to watch it. But yeah, I'm excited. What did you think?
I genuinely feel, Stacy, that this is how you and I originally connected over the Warrens, because I remember you having talked about it, and I just remember being very fascinated by the idea of this couple is real. You're the one who told me about the Warrens being a real couple, and I had no idea. So essentially, Steve, that's what this is. This is a continuation of the franchise where we see the Warrens once again, and we all know, you know, that they work for the church. So everything in a way is kind of spiritually based on the foundation of things. But this one is really perfect because it kind of combines that religious aspect of where this possession is truly evil, but it connects in such a way to this beautiful chemistry of good versus evil. I was just, from start to finish, so pleased with the cinematic imagery in this film, just the right element of violence, and the characters were just so perfectly interlaced. So essentially we have, of course, all of these take place with some type of a possession, but this is an exorcism like no other that I've seen from the Warrens. This really takes you into, again, a beautiful backstory and kind of gets you to understand. But there's a story within a story in this one. And I was really happy that it wasn't predictable. You kind of get to the ending and you are still pleasantly surprised. The flow, the imagery was very dark, but it was just the perfect setting for this film. I think in terms of the Warrens' performance, this was probably the best I've seen, because I think even with the previous film, you really start to see the importance of their relationship and how connected they really are to each other and how they really just get each other. You know, when one is struggling, the other one comes through. And I think that with the previous film, you saw that a little bit, and you see that even more in this film. They just have such an amazing chemistry. There's this beautiful little backstory with them also in this film. But my favorite of the entire series thus far. Highly recommend. I give it 2 extremely enthusiastic thumbs up. And the villain in this one, chef's kiss. I was so happy. I mean, there is just the perfect amount of evil in this for me. I was grinning the whole time. I was like, oh my God, this is great. This is great.
I am so freaking excited. My son was supposed to watch it with me, and then he went with a friend of his to the theater. Ooh. And they saw it at the movies, and he came home and he was like, Mom, you have got to watch this movie. You were gonna love it.
Yeah, I would have gone. I mean, again, I haven't been back to the theaters yet. I mean, as I was saying to Stacy and Kami before we officially went live, I was hoping to review Lin-Manuel Miranda's film In the Heights. A lot of people are loving it, and you guys know that I am a very big fan of the classic film musical. I mean, one of my all-time favorite films now is Singing in the Rain. I can watch that movie any day of the week. I love that movie so much. And I'm also a huge fan of La La Land. I really love La La Land. But we have not watched it yet. We have not.
Chicago?
Wait, say that one more time.
What?
What just happened?
My favorite musical is Chicago.
Oh. I've never seen Chicago. My wife loves Chicago.
It's amazing.
So we haven't seen In the Heights just yet. I wanted to go see it in theaters as a treat for my wife finishing the school year, but she said that can't be because if I go see In the Heights, I'll be singing at the top of my lungs along with the movie. But we still have not watched it on HBO Max yet, but we are planning to watch it at some point in time on the week that this video actually drops. But my brother-in-law did go to the theaters already, and he saw A Quiet Place 2, which is a movie
the other one I need to see.
That I did not see the first one in theaters, but I loved the first one when I finally watched it. I didn't know if I was going to want to go see the second one in theaters, but I know that when it hits on demand, I will definitely check it out because I am such a fan of John Krasinski and Emily Blunt. They are just perfect. Yeah. I am one of the typical people that is begging for Marvel to cast them as Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman for Fantastic Four because that would be an amazing pairing. But the first movie that I'm going to be seeing in theaters is Black Widow, and I am very excited, which will be following closely by Hotel Transylvania Transformation. I am very Transformania. I love the Hotel Transylvania series, even though Adam Sandler is not voicing Dracula in this final film.
What?
And Gendy Tartakovsky wrote and produced the film, but he's not directing it. I do still have high hopes for the franchise conclusion. I don't know why Adam Sandler's not in the movie, Stacy. I really don't.
That's stupid.
Yeah, I think it's really a stupid move on Adam Sandler's part, if you want my honest opinion, because when it comes to his live-action films, he has not given me anything truly great. I mean, I will definitely say Uncut Gems was a game changer for him. That was a performance like no other that I've ever seen him in. But in terms of comedy, when people actually say Adam Sandler hasn't done anything good, I was like, have you seen any of the Hotel Transylvania films? Because he is fantastic in those movies. But, all right, well, I'm glad that you enjoyed The Conjuring, but the burning question, Kami, is what did your stepson think of Star Wars?
He loves it. Oh my goodness, he is so incredibly immersed in it. So he had already seen the very first episode 4 of Star Wars. But I had him rewatch it from the beginning. So we did 4 through 6 and then 1 through 3. I now have created a monster. He runs around the house talking like Jar Jar Binks.
Oh,
I said,
God.
you know, of all the characters that you could have picked up, you picked the most annoying character in the franchise. So yes, he has assimilated a Jar Jar persona. Other than creating that beast, he is absolutely enamored by the whole dynamic. He thinks Darth Vader is so cool. He's still very confused how Luke and Leia are brother and sister. He's still trying to wrap his head around that. He loves Chewbacca. So there's just a lot of fun that comes out of talking about it all the time, because every time that we watch another film, there's just so many more questions. I am loving, though, that he is at 7 being able to remember big names like Tatooine and Naboo. He thinks Naboo is hilarious to say. He's like, oh, look, they're on Naboo again. So it's just incredibly heartwarming for me to watch a new generation enjoy something that is over 40 years old. You know, it's great. And to be able to pass that on, and now he gets the craziness that happens in this room. He's like, oh, now I know about that Star Wars display that you have, and now I understand, that crazy little statue that you have, or whatever the case may be. So getting him to kind of understand this crazy world that I've created in here is so worth it. But yeah, it was a lot of fun to do that.
I hope it
7, 8, and 9 to watch though. But
I hope it doesn't go downhill. I hope it doesn't go downhill. But here's another thing. Maybe not when he's this young, but maybe when he gets to be maybe 9 or 10, you've got to show him some of those animated series. I think that he will love Clone Wars and he will love Rebels. Rebels is great. And
I did have him watch the Clone Wars before we started Star Wars. I think he'll appreciate it now because he seemed a little bit disassociated with it. But now that he's seen 1 through 3 and he kind of gets the whole concept of the Clone Wars and stuff, I think he'll appreciate it more. So I'll definitely, like you said, have him revisit it in a couple of years when I think he can really get immersed in it. But yeah, I've got them all. So I think he'll be ready then.
Unfortunately, he does also have to see the animated film, which is kind of the pilot for the animated series. It's fun, but it's nothing. I don't think it was one of the best things that I've ever seen. But I would love to know when he does get exposed to them how awesome he will think that Ahsoka Tano is, because she is definitely one of the coolest characters that has been introduced to us in Star Wars. And I've also heard The Bad Batch is very good. People are loving that new show because it's made from the same animation studio as Clone Wars and Rebels. So I'm glad to know that there are still some good Star Wars things being given to us thanks to Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni.
Agreed. Yeah, I think that franchise it needs to have a nice mix, because 7, 8, 9. Let's not talk about that part of the franchise right now.
But you also did mention something earlier. You talked about music, and you talked about how a lot of bands were trying to create new music and produce new albums in very unique ways. So yeah, I will definitely say that this year my music collecting has definitely been strong. I have been very impressed by some of the things that I have been listening to. I mean, I never thought I would have seen the day. Okay, are we all Weezer fans in this room, or do we all know Weezer and at least a couple of their songs?
I listened to them in high school when they first came out, but not since.
So do you remember how long it took for them to make that 2001 album after only having 2 records in the 90s? Like, where have they gone? What's going on with them? Well, now they just can't stop making albums. They made 2 so far in 2021.
Dang.
Yeah, wow. and they are, neither of them sound like the other. This is Van Weezer. This came out in May. This is a very guitar-influenced Weezer. This sounds like old school 1995 Weezer. I love it. The song I Need Some of That is probably one of my favorite. It's so catchy. I absolutely think it's fantastic. The other one was Okay Human. It came out in February. This is piano orchestral based. This was an album that really came from Rivers Cuomo's heart, because this was during the pandemic. He was feeling very depressed, and this was one of the only ways that he could really try and find some saving grace. The funny thing was, these albums were supposed to come out in 2020, and Van Weezer was supposed to come out before Okay Human, but because Okay Human was so impactful, he had it come out first. So I thought that was pretty cool. I know I mentioned this band a couple of times, but I'm going to do it again because I finally got the album. This is a band from the UK called Pale Waves. I don't know what it is about them that I love so much, but their first album, My Mind Makes Noises, was awesome. This is Who Am I? This is so good. I love the songs. They're so catchy. They're so good to listen to. There's a music revolution happening right now, and my friend Andy actually gave me a little bit more of an insight to it. There's a new music genre forming called Retrowave. It's basically like trying to capture the best that the 80s gave us, but turn it into something new and fresh. He listens to this band called The Midnight, and I really like it. I mean, there's a song that they have, and the intro is a little bit of dialogue, and they're talking about the phenomenon of the early video game industry in the late 1970s, early 1980s. It's really, really cool. But I was listening to a band called The Night Game just before that. Very retro, sounds very new wave 80s. This is their second album. It was not available for purchase on CD unless you actually bought it directly from their website. And if you did, you get a signature. So my album is signed by Martin Johnson, who is the brainchild of The Night Game. I really like it. Their first album was self-titled. This is called Dog Years. There's a great song in here called I Feel Like Dancing, which I just can't stop listening to. It's amazing. And another band that is within that vein, and it goes also with bands like The Killers and the 1975 and all of that, there's a band that I listen to called Churches, and their fourth album is hitting stores at the end of August. I cannot wait to listen to it. And I just heard the newest single from Coldplay called Higher Power, and I think it's fantastic. Probably my biggest surprise was the newest album from Maroon 5. I had been talking so negatively about this band for a very long time, and their sixth album I never purchased because I thought it was terrible. This one feels like they're redeeming themselves. It still is extremely synthy and still extremely poppy, and they do still have a lot of hip-hop artists as guests on their songs, but it still has little inklings of classic Maroon 5. I mean, if you want to hear something very interesting, there's a song in this album called Remedy, and it features Stevie Nicks. So I'm like, okay, you've got Stevie Nicks from Fleetwood Mac. That's something that intrigues me. So I'm impressed by it. I'm glad, because Maroon 5, when they first came out in 2003, songs about Jane, that was a game changer. And as they kept going on, I was like, when they got to their fourth album, Overexposed, I'm like, what's happening here? Like, there was something truly different and special from this band, and they just decided to go extremely pop. So I just didn't understand why. But I'm really hoping that they go back to that old sound, because that's really what made them the phenomenon that they are today.
I haven't listened to anything.
I went to a virtual concert last week.
Oh, did you?
I did. So just to kind of stick a knife in my side and tell me how old I am, Destination Unknown, which is an album that came out 20 years ago by a band that I love very much called Mest. They are a pop punk band. They came into, I guess, their fame kind of around the same time that Good Charlotte started to make their break. And they decided that they wanted to celebrate the 20th anniversary. So they did a virtual concert. Everything was live. You got to do like a before, like a pre-show and a post-show kind of thing. Super cool. I had a blast going through all of that. It really took me back. It makes you young again for just a moment. But it's funny that you were talking about the signed CD, because I was looking on their website. Their very first album is going off on their website for $50, and I remember scoring it at a show for like $5, and mine is signed by the band. So I was like, this is crazy.
Okay. So
but no, it was really fun. It was an opportunity just to kind of, you know, shed some skin and just enjoy music again. So that for me, going to a live show is like my bread and butter. I love doing that because I don't talk about it with a lot of people, but before, back in the day when I was like in my early 20s, I wanted to get into the music industry, but from a journalism perspective. I wanted to start a music magazine. And so I was actually for about, I would say about 5 years nonstop, I was working with bands, up and coming bands in the pop, punk, and rock scene. And so I knew a lot of bands beforehand, and this is something I really don't tell a lot of people. So like Avenged Sevenfold, I had talked to them before they were big. Mess, Good Charlotte, Newfound Glory. I knew all these guys before they were mainstream. They were just handing out LPs at, you know, pop punk shows. And around 2003, I moved to Washington State, and the music scene is huge there, especially for like underground music and stuff like that. And I had gotten hooked up with a couple of different producers and editors and things in the music industry. And I really wanted to follow that passion, but at the time it just, life didn't work out that way. And so to be able to kind of re-immerse myself in music, sometimes it just brings back all the feels and all the fun that was at that time. And going to Warp tours and going, you know, backstage to the backstage barbecues and just hanging out with the guys. Because for me, when I see celebrities or musicians or anything like that, I don't see them as the way the rest of the world does. I just see them as, you know, human beings that pick up a guitar. And so to have that element, I think that's what Warp Tour did for me, is it really humanized a celebrity, and it kind of just took all that fame away. And so having, you know, that intimacy with certain band members and stuff, I see music in a completely different way. So it was nice to kind of go back and just experience that for a minute and be taken back to a time when I was carefree and didn't have all these, you know, other things to worry about.
Doing what you just did reminded me of some very sad news that actually was recently shared in the music world. I don't know if you saw it, but Mark Hoppus from Blink-182 was diagnosed with cancer. He's fighting cancer right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's been
oh my God.
He's been secretly fighting it, but he just went public with it. He's very, very upset and he's very scared. And yeah, I'm terrified because I love Blink-182. Yeah. I really, really do.
You brought tears to my eyes.
That sucks.
That hits home.
Yeah, I never would have even known. I mean, I don't know what his life was like outside, because, you know, like when I mean, look, one of my all-time favorite shows when I was a teen, and I wouldn't be surprised if the both of you watched this show too. I loved Behind the Music, but
yeah,
I did not know anything about Blink-182 like you hear about bands. Like, I mean, I still will always say, and I know Kami's going to appreciate this, I think the greatest story ever told on Behind the Music is Motley Crue. That is just the craziest pure rock and roll story I've ever heard about any artist ever. But look, speedy recovery, God willing he beats it. I really hope so. But that takes me into a movie that I just watched for the very first time. And I finally watched Ray from 2004 with Jamie Foxx's Oscar-winning performance, and rightfully so.
It's an amazing movie.
I didn't know anything about Ray Charles's addiction to heroin. I did not know about it. And quite frankly, what really made me upset about that movie, first of all, let me just say, it's a good movie. It's a very good movie. I would give it 3.5 stars. I think there's rewatchability there, not necessarily purchasability there. I loved Kerry Washington's performance. I love the fact that Booger from Revenge of the Nerds is in that movie. It made me really upset when I turned off that movie and I said, I can't sympathize with this guy. I mean, this is a music legend who did some of the most unorthodox things for music to turn it into a music revolution. But because of the type of person that he was, and the thing that really upset me was, I don't know if this was just for cinematic value or if this really was part of his true story, but the guy had no shame for a long, long time. And it just made me feel so upset that this is the type of person that this legend really is. But I will separate the art from the artist here, because, again, it's like Michael Jackson. Like, yes, say what you will about Michael Jackson, the person. We know that there's a lot of controversy around that iconic king of pop. But I will never, ever, ever say do not listen to his music, because Michael Jackson's music is unlike any other music ever made. His music is beautiful. Whether it's his solo career or the Jackson 5, it's wonderful. But it really makes me upset when you really see these true stories about these artists. It's like when I saw Rocket Man. Like, I did not know how horrible of a substance abuser Elton John was, but I also had no idea how badly he was abused by other people, which drove him to his addictions. He knew he was going down a really
well, same
bad
thing can be
hole.
said about Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson had a horrible childhood.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's easy to be very critical of people's lives and why they make the decisions that they make, because Hollywood glamorizes things. And if 2020 taught us nothing, it really took the wool off people's eyes in terms of Hollywood and the grit and just it made it gritty. It's not glamorous, it is gritty, and it's not a pretty place, and those people are not as wonderful as magazines and the common picture makes them out to be. They're human beings, they have lives, they have problems just like everybody else, but they have money, and money makes additional problems. That said, a lot of these people that started off in the industry as children were horribly abused, mentally, physically, sexually in some cases. They were made to be these producing robots for so many people, not just their parents, but for the industry. They were industry whores. And the thing is that when you are subjected to these things day in and day out, a lot of the times just to cope, just to function, you're turning to substance abuse. You're turning to these things that either numb it, erase it, make it manageable, or in cases like with Judy Garland, for example, she started off in the industry as a child. However, a lot of her substance abuse came from just being able to function and tolerate being able to wake up early, because they didn't have the same child labor laws back then that they do now. So she was, exposed to all of that very early, in addition to being kind of whored out at a very early age and exposed to men that were much older than her.
Yeah.
So, when people want to drag on the backstories of artists, I say, kind of just hold your tongue a little bit, because we don't know what it was like for them. We don't know fully what they were exposed to. Even in a movie depiction, you're only getting what that director or that creator wants you to see, or what they fully understand and what their interpretation of that is. So if the actual artist isn't involved in that story, you still have to take it with a grain of salt. I have extreme compassion for people who have gone public with their story. Rose Mcgowan is one that comes to light quite a bit, because even through her pain, she's still standing tall for other people. She just had a huge, platform for Britney Spears.
Yeah, look what's going on with Britney right now. Look what's going on with Britney Spears right now.
My heart. Britney has been in prison for 13 years, and people want to laugh and people want to go back and say, oh, pity is her, she's a multi-billionaire. Okay, be a multi-billionaire and have 2 children that you can't see because your father says you have 30 minutes with them once a week.
And it also
you can't get married.
And it hurts. And it hurts because I'm sorry. I just want to say, because I'm so sorry, Kami, but I just want to say it's sort of hitting home to me. I'm not a big Britney Spears fan, but it's kind of hitting home for me just a little bit, because this woman is our age, and it's scary.
I am a huge Britney Spears fan. I never stopped being a fan of hers, but I was a huge pop punk kind of kid. And in that came the pop music scene. And then we had the boy band craze that came up again. So I am of that age. I was probably a little bit too old to like NSYNC. I was like 20, 21 at the time, but maybe not. I mean, so NSYNC is synonymous with Britney Spears, because we know Britney Spears dated Justin Timberlake for quite a few years. And I love that we're finally exposing Justin Timberlake for the pig that he was during that time. Justin got so much praise because Britney supposedly cheated on him with her choreographer. Okay, go back and do some research on Wade Robson. Really, Wade was not the exemplary person that we all say that he was. Yeah, he rose to fame with BSB and NSYNC and Britney because he put them on the map with their dance moves. But at the end of the day, he was just as much of a sleaze in that situation. Britney got the rap for it. Justin got the glorification for it because he cried the world a river. And then Britney, who was basically put out for our enjoyment, was being whored out by her parents to the world, made both of her parents very rich, and then had a mental breakdown. She had been in the industry since she was 8 years old. Like, God help her. Finally, in her early 20s, she was like, I can't do this anymore. I need a fucking break. Shaved her head, and then the world thought she was crazy. Basically, what she was doing is just saying, I'm ridding myself of all of this. Just leave me alone for a while. Just let me breathe. Just let me be me. And then they put her under a psych evaluation for doctors who were paid to say what they said, put on medication that she didn't need to be on, and then put under house arrest for the last 13 years. And then we have the audacity to sit back and just say, oh, poor Brittany, what happened to her? Her parents encapsulated her in her fucking mansion, you know? So when I see movies like Ray and other movies that depict celebrities, musicians, just know that there's more to that than what we're seeing. And my heart goes out to anybody who has endured any kind of mental, physical, emotional abuse that has led them to be reliant on alcohol or drugs to get them through being a source of my entertainment. So I don't dislike him for the fact that he was addicted to heroin. Anybody who's addicted to heroin is going to have some issues.
Yeah.
In the same regard, though, I think that we lose empathy as a people of observers, because we don't see celebrities and musicians as people, and we need to see them as people. They're not here for our entertainment. They have chosen a path of entertainment as a source of income, but that doesn't mean that we own them. That doesn't mean that we can be voyeuristic all the time. I mean, can you imagine walking down the street and having 50 cameras in your face, never being able to go to a restaurant, I remember in the early 2000s, there were a little horde of celebrity moms that had to go to court just to say, get the paparazzi out of my face. I have children now. I want to be left alone. You need to make some type of legal law that prevents them from being able to be this close to me and taking a picture of me and my family. That's an invasion of my privacy. I remember Jennifer Garner doing that when she started having children with Ben Affleck. And we need to stop forgetting that they're human beings. And so I don't know, I have a catch-22 about films like this, because we're only seeing a fraction of it. I don't know, I just have a whole different interpretation and opinion, I think, about Hollywood in general, because, you know, having mentioned what I mentioned earlier, I've seen some people in a more human element, you know, and I never pat myself on the back like, oh, look who I know, because again, I can see some of these musicians that I've worked with before, and they're my friends. I don't see them as this entity that is there for my entertainment. I see them as a person who's talented, whom I enjoy watching, who I'm grateful for the availability of being in their presence, and then they're still a human being, you know? So I don't know, I think we need to humanize things sometimes. So, you know, my heart breaks for Ray Charles. It really does. I couldn't imagine having to be in a position where I have to self-medicate myself just to function.
Well, things are about to get bad to worse, because I'm about to continue to stoke this fire that Kami already has here. Kami, what is it about The Departed you don't like? Because I just watched this movie to celebrate its 15th anniversary, and after watching it again, I am such a fan of Martin Scorsese. I still think that his best movie is Goodfellas, and it should have beaten Dances with Wolves for Best Picture. I'm going to say that till the day I die. I don't care if people say I am completely uneducated and don't know what I'm talking about, but watching The Departed again, forget sometimes how incredible that movie is, because the whole concept of rats on both sides with extremely amazing acting. I mean, oh my God, Mark Wahlberg is the best thing that happens in this movie. Every line that comes out of his mouth, just the excuse to use his hardcore, authentic Boston accent is awesome. Same thing with Matt Damon. The guys who are actually from Boston, being able to use their Boston accent is awesome, because I feel for someone like Matt Damon, because he has to hide that accent in a lot of his roles. But the fact that he's able to actually use it in this movie is just awesome. And Jack Nicholson, oh God, Jack is just great in this movie. even all the other minor characters. I mean, like, it's also amazing when you take a look at that movie and you forget how many famous faces are in that movie. You forget that Alec Baldwin is in this movie. You forget that Martin Sheen is in this movie. You forget that Anthony Anderson is in this movie. And of course, the thing about this movie is, I guess the reason why The Departed is so important to me is the same reason why Catch Me If You Can is so important to me. Catch Me If You Can, by the way, is celebrating a milestone anniversary next year, so that will be talked about on The Old, the New, and the Awesome in 2022. But because of Steven Spielberg and Martin Scorsese, Leonardo DiCaprio became this actor who I originally despised because he was the Hollywood heartthrob, and I thought that he was less to be desired. But the right director gets his hands on this guy, and my entire world is shook, because I'm like, oh my God, how wrong was I about Leonardo DiCaprio? Because he went on to work with Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, and Quentin Tarantino. And he ends up winning the Oscar finally for The Revenant, directed by Mr. Iñárritu. Wow. I was so wrong about Luke from Growing Pains. Yes, I went there.
You kind of threw me for a loop there. I was like, wait, I wasn't expecting you to say that.
Oh, I remembered him on Growing Pains.
I was like, wait, he's right. Okay, let me preface by saying Martin Scorsese is my favorite director of all time. This cast is absolutely phenomenal. That is exactly why I gravitated to this film. I absolutely loved everything that this film could potentially be. I think for me, it wasn't so much the film as a whole. I think it was a build up to the end, and the ending was just so, it was so disappointing for me. I felt like it was just so bland for everything that was happening. And so I vehemently remember the first time that I watched it, I was like, that's it? And so I waited a year, and then I picked it up on DVD, and I watched it again from home, and I felt the same way. And I think that sometimes you hope that you watch a movie again for the second or third time, and you're like, okay, maybe I missed something. Maybe there was something that was said. Maybe there was something within a plot and this movie was set up so perfectly. I mean, you essentially have someone who's working both sides, so there's a lot going on in this film. There's a bunch of amazing cameos in this film. The dialogue is impeccable. So There's a lot going for this film. But for me, it was honestly just the ending. And I think that for me as a moviegoer, the ending is everything. Either it's exemplary and it sticks with you and you're like, that was a damn good film. And from a directive standpoint, I think that in Scorsese's head, this was the perfect ending. As someone who sat there for 2 hours watching the film, I was just a little underwhelmed. And I think that's why it's never been a favorite for me, because I was expecting something epic. And then you get this rooftop scene and you're like, okay, and do I get something else? Like, really, this is how we're going out, So I think that for me, it really boiled down to that. I don't have any qualms with the direction. I don't have any problems with the cinematography. Everybody knows you go into a Scorsese film, you're going to see a masterpiece. I mean, the cinematography is always top notch. He does not pull out any stop. I mean, he's flawless in his filmmaking ability. He just has this vision like no other. I mean, you really feel like you're there when you're watching a Scorsese film. Absolutely. And then he has such an innate ability to get the right actors for the part. He casts these amazing people that just are this person, like there's no questioning who that character is. And then, like you're saying, when you find someone that you're trying to depict from an Irish mob perspective that has this brilliant, a genuine Boston accent, I mean, that just takes it to another level. And I think sometimes people forget Matt Damon does speak that way, So to see these guys in their natural element, And I really love Scorsese in the fact that he is loyal to his cast. I mean, we saw that with, you know, the recent Irishman with Pacino and De Niro. And
Yes. I like that movie, by the
that,
way.
That chemistry. Oh, one of my favorites. Again, it's a long one. People don't go in thinking that it's going to just be this quick thing. No, it's dialogue
It's very
heavy.
good. It's beautiful.
But I think that that's a nod that Scorsese has to his cast, because I mean, when you look at these big names like DiCaprio, Pacino, you know, Nicholson, these are guys you want to have rich dialogue. These are guys that are capable of it. You wouldn't expect anything less from them. And so when you go into a Scorsese film, in addition to the ambiance of the setting that you get from him, you also should expect that amazing dialogue that you walk away with. And I think that maybe parts of that were missing for me here, because again, the first half of the film, you're getting all that. You're getting this rich buildup. You're getting this really interesting backstory from both sides of the coin. And to get to an ending that just kind of leaves you feeling a little bit meh. I don't know. It's one that I own. I have it. As a matter of fact, I took it out just to prove I have it. I own it. So even things that I hate, I own. I don't want to say I hate it, because again, the cast of characters, the direction, it makes the film worth watching. But I think that goes to show you that if you are a good director who has amazing casting ability, you can get people to dislike your films and still buy it.
It's the reason why Tarantino, Edgar Wright, and Martin Scorsese and Zack Snyder are some of my favorite directors, because they all have one thing in common. They're not just brilliant movie makers, they're fans. These are people that are just as passionate about movies that they see in general alongside the movies that they actually create. Scorsese, you can tell this guy is the type of guy, like, if I'm not making a movie, I'm sitting in my own home theater and I'm just watching my movie collection. That is something that I could so see Martin Scorsese doing. He's the type of person that I want to go see a movie with, because I can tell he's just going to have something awesome to say. And that's why I gravitate to those directors.
You had mentioned earlier about Raya and the Dragon and how you wanted the Blu-ray so that you could get the extra features. And that's how I feel about Scorsese films and why I got The Irishman, because you get that extra table talk. It's him, De Niro, Pacino, and Joe Pesci sitting at a table, and they're having some scotch or some whiskey, they're smoking cigars, and they're talking like buddies. And that, for me, as the film goer, was everything, because you know this is what they're doing in their own time. When they were talking about making this movie, you know that's what happened. They got together at one of the guys' houses and they were like, all right, guys, let's make this magic happen. And when you get a cast of characters like that in a room, some brilliant actors who have such an amazing repertoire of movies that they've starred in, you just know it's going to be magic. So despite the fact that this wasn't a win in the end for me, I still own it, because there is so much cinematic magic and beauty in this film that I can appreciate. And so I think that sometimes you do have to disassociate yourself from some of the things that you don't like and say some of the great things about the film. So even though it wasn't a win for me overall, I'll still watch it. I'll still enjoy elements of it because of what Scorsese created.
Are there any fans of James Spader in this room, particularly people who grew up in the 80s and watched all the Brat Pack films?
Yes.
So I am rewatching one of the most amazing shows that I've ever seen in my life, and it is Boston Legal, starring, of course, James Spader, Candice Bergen, and William Shatner. Now, I'm not a fan of lawyer shows. I am not.
Ally McBeal.
Yeah.
Watch that and you'll like it.
Well, that's the thing. It's the same producer. It's David Kelly. The thing about Boston Legal is that's actually a spinoff of The Practice. And my dad was watching this show once. He goes, you got to sit down. You got to watch this show with me. Because my dad is a Star Trek fan. And let me just say that ever since I watched Boston Legal, William Shatner's not Captain Kirk to me anymore. William Shatner, for me, will forever be Denny Crane. I love him on Boston Legal. And also, as a Star Trek fan, I can appreciate Boston Legal because that's where all these ex-Star Trek cast members showing up as reoccurring characters or actually guest appearances. Renee Auberjonois from Deep Space Nine is in this show. Jerry Ryan from Star Trek Voyager shows up. Even Scott Bakula shows up on this show. Armin Shimmerman, who plays Quark in Deep Space Nine, is a judge on one of these shows. It's just a fun show, and I just also love all the cast in the show. It's dynamic, it's fun, it's funny. I mean, it was also really bold. I mean, I loved that Candice Bergen is on that show as well because she plays this amazing character named Shirley Smith. By the way, I don't know if any of you even watched Boston Legal. Am I actually talking to people who have never watched it before?
I've never seen it.
Okay.
I've seen it.
Well, then you definitely know the episode where Shirley Schmidt and James Spader's character Alan Shore first meet. They meet in the men's room, very Ally McBealish, if I must say. And she goes, "I'm Shirley Schmidt." And so James Spader goes, "Alan Shore." And he just holds up his hand. And she goes, "I really hope you plan on washing your hand first." And he responds by saying, "I happen to keep an extremely clean penis." He's James Spader. I had only seen him in Pretty in Pink, and I've never watched The Blacklist, by the way. But oh my God, as Alan Shore on Boston Legal, and especially the friendship between him and Denny Crane as William Shatner, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's what you want your own friendships in your life to be.
And I think that's the beauty of getting someone like Shatner on the show, because you are guaranteed to have them pull some, characters out of their corner pocket from previous projects that they worked on. So, shows like Boston Legal have this sense of this really cool TV magic, because you're gonna see people that you love not expecting them, and then when it happens you're like, oh, this is incredible, and it just works because they have that chemistry from a previous show. I love Shatner. Shatner is just, he's a vision, he's a sight for sore eyes. He's an amazing actor, and I love him in anything that he does, whether it's sci-fi, legal, it doesn't matter. He really does fit whatever part he's given. Again, that comes from great casting, and I think that comes from being a phenomenal actor, an actor that can truly, genuinely absorb any part that they're cast in. There's not a lot of actors left that can do that. Shatner is definitely one of those, and I will sing Candice Bergen's praise forever. I love her. She is just perfection.
In that show, I never watched Murphy Brown. I know that Murphy Brown was a game changer.
I did.
It was great.
I loved her, Murphy Brown.
But her on Boston Legal, oh God, especially in the episodes where her ex, played by Tom Selleck, shows up, the chemistry between Candice Bergen and Tom Selleck is gorgeous. It's pure gold.
Stargate?
I'm sorry?
Have you not seen Stargate?
I have seen Stargate. I didn't like Stargate. So was Kurt Russell.
Yeah, but you said you've only ever seen him in Pretty in Pink. He's in Stargate.
Yes, I know, but I only saw Stargate once and I didn't enjoy it, which is why, and no offense, Stacy. I mean, look, I'm glad that you referenced Stargate. That's a cult sci-fi favorite amongst many, but not everybody has actually watched Stargate, and not everybody actually likes Stargate, which is why I didn't reference it. So I apologize. Ironically, I keep forgetting that James Spader is in Stargate because I don't remember. What?
He's in The Office too.
That's right. I forgot he was in The Office, but
I didn't know that.
It's because of the fact, but the truth of the matter is, Boston Legal is pretty much what gave him all of these current roles that he played, because he did play these characters after he was in Boston Legal. Also, there is someone else on this show. She's only there for 2 seasons, but now she's like one of TV's favorites for the last couple of years. Julie Bowen. I mean, from Happy Gilmore, she's on this show, and then she goes on to do Modern Family. And that just reminded me, Michael J. Fox's episodes in Boston Legal. Oh, they're beautiful.
Oh, yes.
Michael J. Fox as Daniel Post, those dialogue moments that he has with William Shatner are brilliant.
Yeah, you just brought back all the feels. I remember watching Entertainment Tonight when they made the announcement that he was going to be on an episode of Boston Legal, and I just remember the world reacting like, oh my God, we get Michael J. Fox in the midst of this amazing cast. So yeah, that was good television back then. I really miss good TV. I think, you know, in addition to Hollywood kind of faltering in terms of creativity, because we do see a lot of reboots of things that we've already seen. And it's nice to kind of get that, you know, we're starting to see that also in a mix of podcasts right now, where we're getting like the OC came back in a podcast, but you can also see it on YouTube. They just brought back One Tree Hill in the form of a podcast with the girls from the show. So you know, we're missing the elements of people being creative in Hollywood and giving us originals, but we're also losing that amazing cast of actors, because I mean, you know, we were just talking about the Scorsese film and how he has that innate ability to draw in these amazing actors, but the actors that we loved from the 90s television shows, you know, they're aging, they're getting older, and we just don't have them available for all these great shows anymore. And I don't know. I think that Hollywood writers have been lacking for at least 5 years, if not longer. We're losing that ability to just create something phenomenal. And we have shows that are being beaten into the ground, that are entering, you know, their 20th season. And it's like, how much longer can we do this? How much longer is it going to be funny? Or is it going to be interesting to even tune in and watch? So I wish that we could get back that feeling of 90s television, because I remember Friday nights being the coolest thing. If you weren't going to Blockbuster to get your 3 or 4 movies for the weekend, you were looking forward to NBC or CBS, because you had a lineup of shows that you genuinely wanted to watch, you know? Yeah. And we just don't have that anymore. And it's sad, because you have a whole generation of very creative people that have so much technology at their fingertips, and yet we're regurgitating things from 20 years ago. We can do better.
Let's talk about the Friends reunion, because I watched that, and it was Steve, shut your mouth. It was everything it could, like, I could have wanted it to be, except for one part of it when they brought in Lady Gaga. If they could have excluded her, I would have been so much happier.
Thank you for saying that. That was so not necessary. I hate it. She tried to steal the spotlight. She's trying to steal the spotlight from Phoebe, and it really pissed me off. I'm like, stop it. Nobody wants to hear you sing that song. We want to hear her sing that song. So shut up, please.
To do with Friends? Absolutely nothing. They randomly brought her in, and she literally tried to out-sing Phoebe, and it pissed me off. But the rest of the thing, I was laughing. I was crying. I was just like, it was such a heartfelt, you know, 2 hours. I was so emotionally happy after watching that. But yeah, the Lady Gaga scene, I was like, what the fuck is this? Why did they do that?
But did you notice kind of at the end, Lisa Kudrow was kind of biting back at her. You had to really know that sassiness from her, but you could tell she was just like, stop singing already. This is me. This is my spotlight. This is the first time we got to see the cast of Friends together in the same room. Like, shut the fuck up, Lady Gaga. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about your ability to sing right now. We just want to hear Phoebe, please.
It's not your moment.
I agree. I think that if you are a fan, or were a fan of Friends in its heyday, I think that this was very much worth watching. I think that a lot of people maybe expected something different, but this was perfect. It was an intimate relationship of the cast. I mean, that's what we were seeing friends be friends and reminisce about the old days. And that's exactly what we needed as fans, you know, to see them in the same room, to see them crying with each other, and just talking about the moments that meant something to them. So I think it was perfectly done. I don't think it was too much. I think that maybe the interview style on the couch kind of took away a little bit. I think if maybe they would have put them on the couch and not had I can't think of his name, that night show host. What is his name?
James Corden.
Yeah. I think if they wouldn't have had him asking questions, I think maybe that would have also given us a little bit more, because I think in some way he was fangirling a little bit, you know, like he was just so excited to be there that he kind of got lost in a couple moments. I know it did a lot.
For how they were intimate on the set. Like, I loved them being on the set and reminiscing about old episodes and old moments. And then when they were watching their bloopers, when they were redoing the quiz show, like reliving those moments, even when they were rereading their lines. When Ross and Rachel were rereading their lines together, I was sobbing. I still cry every time I see them kiss. Like, I was emotionally spent after watching that. I went through all the emotions. It was so perfect.
I stopped watching the show after season 2.
Oh my gosh, I watched it until the end.
Sorry, I like the monkey, okay? I like the monkey.
Oh, I hated the monkey. The monkey was so gross and annoying. I just was waiting for him to
Which
fling
is funny because Ross said he hated the monkey. David Schwimmer was like, the monkey was the worst.
The stupidest.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Little vermin. But no, I really feel that for the show, you know, like the let me try to get that out. The dynamic of the conversation of the you know, the characters being friends in real life added the beauty to that show. And I think had the reunion just been that, you know, pieces of them kind of just going back, walking the set, rehearsing their lines, and all that extra got left out, I think it would have been okay. I think that it was just kind of too perfectly placed in some places, and it took away from them. It just needed to be about them, not all the BS that they were trying to, you know, filter in for filler.
Right,
I have just one little thing that I completely forgot to say about Boston Legal, because if I don't say it, someone's going to yell at me. Betty White's also on the show in the first 2 seasons, and she's great.
No, I didn't know that.
But then again, anything that Betty White is in is great. End of story.
Yeah, that's true.
So the last thing that I actually wanted to talk about is something that my wife and I have actually been DVRing since the earlier portion of this year, and we finally started watching them. Now, granted, I was bored to tears for a couple of days, so I decided to watch all the stuff that we had recorded without her, but I am totally going to be rewatching them. It's on the History Channel. It's called The Food That Built America. I am enthralled by this documentary series because I am someone who does love history. I am married to a history teacher whom I love with all my heart, and she is passionate about history in all shapes and forms. But, you know, when you're talking about things in America like the Civil War and the Industrial Revolution, World War I, World War II, the Great Depression, the baby boom, you don't think about things like Hershey bars or breakfast cereal or McDonald's. And through this show, I am learning so many interesting things about all of these types of foods and these brands that I love. Like, I had no idea that soda was originally being created to be a health tonic.
Yeah.
I had no idea that even though pizza was a Italian creation, and you did have your authentic pizza parlors in Brooklyn and Manhattan, it was only in Missouri where 2 brothers believed that pizza could be the next food craze, and Pizza Hut was created to mass market the concept of pizza and the way that we now eat pizza as Americans and the average American family is because of Pizza Hut and Domino's. It is so interesting to me.
I bet I would like that show. I love food.
You would love it, because what I love so much about it is it's a very unique documentary. I know Kami wants to say something because she's watched previous documentaries in this exact same way. It's sort of like a movie and a documentary all at the same time. Like, you have actors playing these people. Like, she's going to talk about the men that built America, where you see like Carnegie and Vanderbilt and Rockefeller, and they're played by all of these. Yeah. So The Food That Built America, same exact concept.
Okay.
And I am just enthralled by this documentary series.
I had my kids watch The Men Who Built America when we were doing history for homeschooling.
Oh,
very informative.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, I haven't seen the one that you're referencing, The Food That Built America, Steve. It's definitely on my to watch list, but I think shows like this are so important because, like you said, it does have like a cinematic vibe to it. So you get this cast of characters, but you get also this voiceover. So you're not just inundated with this kind of just boring depiction of what history was. I mean, it's really genuinely exciting. It's visually very appealing, and yes, I will sing praises of the Men Who Built America because it really does give you a genuine understanding of the foundation of this country. You know, just how the people that are in power today are really the people that built the country, and it was just a continued, you know, regurgitation of their wealth that got them to be the powerhouses that they are. And when you look at the way the country is run today and just where all of this originated, but then also the integration from other foreign nations, you know, just how there was just so much integration that we don't talk about, that we don't see the partnerships and the business deals and things that went completely different from the expectation. And I think it's very important as an American to watch shows like this because it gives you a greater appreciation for the world we live in, you know, and I really do think that when things kind of go astray or go left, so to speak, that you kind of look back on where we were, what kind of country we were, what kind of camaraderie we had as people, the importance of building this country with your hands and, you know, it meaning something versus today we're just so, again, so you're just so now, and let's get the product out as fast as we can, that we've kind of lost the sense of the way this country was founded, the way this country was built. We're just kind of I don't know, we're just kind of like a plastic mold sometimes, and I hate that. But to watch shows like that, it really gives you that fire within you again, and it's like, oh, okay, this is cool. This is what it was all about, you know? And so to see the food, it's really cool too, because it shows you the evolution of where we came as people.
And it's also really interesting because it shows you that it was through just complete accidents that certain products taste the way they do. I mean, I never understood why Reese's peanut butter tastes the way it does and that it doesn't taste like Jif, that it doesn't taste like Skippy. And some of the questions that I never even thought of in my lifetime actually get answered without me knowing the question, like, why was Heinz ketchup packaged in glass bottles? Why do we have the Happy Meal? Like, I never even think about these things. Like, why is White Castle white? There's actually a reason. The M&M in M&M's, there's a story behind that candy. It's so weird, but so interesting to see these events unfold. And I'm just like, you know, you'll never have these talks in history classes, but you will just never look at the food that you know and love the same way again. Also, I never knew Nabisco is short for National Biscuit Company. Never knew that, and now I know.
I'll definitely have to watch that.
I will say though, on the line of food, I have to thank you, Steve, for making me watch that documentary, The Deli Man, because that is also a piece of our history that really just, oh my God, I was in love with that documentary. I was enamored by just the integration of foreign nationals coming into this country and using their skill set and sharing their food with us. And then now we have it as like a common staple, and to see the integration of Jersey and New York, and just, it really enriches cities like that. And again, it gets you excited about American history, where it came from, how it connects to other cultures and other countries. The Deli Man, I also highly, highly recommend, Stacy, if you have not seen it. It's about the Jewish delicacies and the delicatessens in our country. Oh, chef's kiss. I love that so much.
You will basically understand after you watch Deli Man why when you come to New York, when people say you cannot leave New York until you've had a bagel with cream cheese, a slice of pizza, and of course, the pastrami or corned beef sandwich. This is the reason as to why. And also, some of the people in that documentary, specifically Ziggy, which is what the entirety of that documentary is about. Ziggy Gruber is a riot. Like, I will go to Houston to meet this man because I just want to hear the stories, because I could tell him stories about my grandfather being a kosher butcher in Washington Heights and loving deli. And just like, there would be so many amazing stories to share.
Steve, have you seen Somebody Feed Phil yet?
No.
On Netflix. It's Phil that created Everybody Loves Raymond, that guy, and he goes around eating, and he's so funny and he's so wonderful.
Phil Rosenthal,
yeah, that guy
is a character because
he's amazing, and he goes to all these different countries and cities around the world and eats his way around the world, and he brings his wife along sometimes. He talks to his parents on Zoom chats. He's so funny, and the show is just so sweet and wholesome. You will love it.
What I love about Phil Rosenthal is the way that he created Everybody Loves Raymond. That's a great story. He literally said to everybody when they were starting to put Everybody Loves Raymond together, he said, okay, here's what we're going to do. I want you all to go home for the weekend. Spend time with your families. And on Monday, I want you all to come back to the office, and I want to hear about what happened on your weekend. That's how Everybody Loves Raymond became the show that it is. It's all about real life family stories. My mom, I didn't watch the show religiously, but my mom always says to me that her favorite Everybody Loves Raymond episode is the one with the suitcase. The fact that it just sits in the front of the house, and throughout the entire week, nobody unpacks it, nobody moves it. It's like you can relate so much to that one little nuance.
Yeah.
It's so mundane, but it's something that everybody can relate to. And that's what makes Everybody Loves Raymond but the amazing show that it is, alongside that amazing cast. I mean, look, Ray Romano and Patricia Heaton are great, but you could not have that show without Peter Boyle and Doris Roberts. I'm sorry. And Brad Garrett. Brad Garrett's awesome.
But yeah, you need to watch
again,
that.
Going back to great television.
Yep.
Great television that we don't have anymore.
And
yep,
also,
that's true.
Because I watched The Food That Built America, I actually rewatched a movie that I own that I absolutely love that I hadn't watched in a while. I rewatched The Founder. And I don't know if either of you have ever seen it, but I was 100% interested in that movie the minute I heard that it was coming out. And of course, the fact that Michael Keaton was going to be playing Ray Kroc, coming right off of Birdman. And I still love that movie. Is it a glamorous film? No, it's not. But it's just a story that just captivates you. And also, as people who do appreciate good television, you will never look at Nick Offerman the same way again once you finish watching The Founder.
I haven't seen it. I have a good movie, though, that I watched from Netflix this month.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I watched, and it's based off a book. It's The Woman in the Window.
I heard about that.
Yeah. It has Amy Adams in it. She stars in
great.
it.
I love Amy
She's
Adams.
fantastic. She plays a woman who has agoraphobia. Her family died in a car crash.
Yes, I saw the trailer for that movie.
It's absolutely stunning, and it has twists and turns in it, and I did not catch what was going to happen at the end. The acting was phenomenal. It's very dark. It was a great movie. I totally recommend it.
First time I ever saw Amy Adams, it was Catch Me If You Can. I saw it on the big screen, and I said to myself the minute I saw this young woman who I had never seen in a movie before, I said, I want more of her.
Leap Year.
Oh, nah.
That's
Lois.
the first time I saw
She
her.
is Lois Lane. She is Lois Lane. And also, another one of my favorite performances of Amy Adams is Arrival.
Yes.
She is amazing in that movie.
Yeah.
I also just recently watched it. I just recently rewatched Enchanted. I love her in that movie. She is so cute in that movie.
Oh, I love that movie. That's one of my favorite Amy Adams movies.
Yeah, she's phenomenal.
Going back to the Deli Man kind of integrating all this movies and television, I'm surprised by the number of actors that are Jewish.
Yeah, that's something that's going to flip your lid.
Yeah, I was like, oh my God, he's Jewish. Oh my God, he's Jewish. I mean, some of the names you can kind of just tell have, you know, the authentic family names. And then of course, like Jerry Stiller, you know, he was Jewish because he puts that in a lot of his acting and stuff. But there was some that they were sitting at a table with like a big old group, and I'm like, oh my God, that comedian. It was a beautiful blend of old Hollywood and then, you know, kind of like what we're talking about, the 80s and 90s television. It just warmed my heart to see food and some of my favorite actors come together and then learn this about them. I loved it. So it's interesting how all of these different elements of our conversation right now are just, they kind of blend together.
Yeah, I think Kami, maybe one of these days will actually make an entire episode dedicated to Deli Man, but that's one of the things that a lot of people don't know. I mean, when you take a look at the concept of stand-up comedy, yes, you could go all the way back to the Middle Ages, even back to Egyptian times with like the magicians and court jesters and stuff. But it was really in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s where a lot of young Jewish men and women just went to the Catskills with all of their peers, and they were perfecting the craft of the stand-up comedian. That is where you find out that names like Sid Caesar and Jerry Stiller and Ann Mira, Lenny Bruce, all of these legendary names. Like, look, when people find out that Milton Berle is Jewish, they flip their lids. They cannot believe it. Or the fact that Sid Caesar or the Three Stooges, all of these big names revolutionized comedy for the better, because then you get Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy, Sam Kinison. You had a revolution that all started with this tight little community, and they turned it into something truly, truly phenomenal. I mean, especially when you take a look at Saturday Night Live. Take a look at the 90s cast. You have a beautiful, diverse blend of comedians. You have Dana Carvey, Mike Myers, Adam Sandler, David Spade, Chris Farley, Kevin Nealon. Oh, the list goes on and on. But it's all because of the fact that a bunch of people decided we're just going to take, like taking Deli and turning this into a brand new phenomenon, take it to the next level. These young men and women said, we're going to take comedy and we're going to take it to the next level. Because there was a point in time when I was very young that, and then we're going to officially end it today, everybody. And look, I know we're having way too much fun, but sometimes all good things must come to an end. But my mom once showed me the Ed Sullivan Show when it was on syndication. And I would watch some of these old comedians. I would watch Alan King, Joan Rivers, like Red Buttons. Like, you'd never guess that all of these people were Jewish, and that they were just, and they were not acting like Jews. They were just acting like typical men and women talking about funny stuff. And that's why stand-up comedy, I mean, that's the one thing that's getting me very nervous about the world we're living in today. I mean, for crying out loud, Billy Crystal has officially gone up public and said, Houston, we have a problem. Comedy is in so much trouble now because of the fact that people don't know how to have a sense of humor anymore. Watch comedians in cars getting coffee on Netflix, and that conversation that Jerry Seinfeld has with everybody from Bill Maher to Bill Burr, they always talk about it, and it's crazy.
But is it Chris Hart that has the new podcast that kind of talks about the comedy or the comedic industry being in ruins because of how politically correct we are now? And I mean, this kind of goes back to, you know, the era where, of course, I can't think of his name. Help me out, Seinfeld guy, Kramer. When Kramer kind of took the bad rap for his joke. Thank you. When he took the bad rap for that joke, I mean, yeah, the joke was very intense, but, you know, what he said at the time was, we used to be able to say this stuff and people didn't take offense to it. It's not like, this is how I feel, this is my act. This is, I'm standing up on stage and I'm making a joke, you know? And I understand for some people it's not a joke, but that comedian might not be for you. And I think that we have gone so far left with everything hurts and everybody needs a safe space that you can't just separate yourself. Okay, if that comedian's not for you, if those jokes aren't for you, then don't support that comedian. But don't take it away from the rest of us and, you know, put them into this cancel culture because you can't laugh at a joke, you know? That was what comedy shows were. You came to a comedy show and you knew that every culture, every race, every religion was gonna be talked about, everybody was going to be made fun of in the same way. And everybody laughed together. We kind of just all looked at each other like, oh, this one's about you. This one's about you, you know, not even knowing who we were sitting next to in a crowd. I couldn't tell you how many comedy clubs I've been to over the course of the last, you know, 2-3 decades. And that was an enjoyment of it. And then you met the comedian after the show, or, you know, you got backstage passes or whatever. And they're a different person. They're not just the act that they put on, you know. Yeah, sure, certain elements of that showcase is part of their life or their upbringing, but they'll put that in the forefront, you know. I am this or whatever, and they'll make fun of themselves in the process. I think that's really the key, or the core of it, is that we've forgotten how to laugh at ourselves. And when you can laugh at yourself, then that really is the ticket, because you should be able to laugh at yourself. You should be able to make mistakes and look back on it and not be so hard on yourself. And you should also be able to look at the flaws and the funny little tidbits of your culture or your race or your religion and laugh, you know, because there's funny things. We're human. We do stupid things all the time. And I don't know, it bothers me, but it was a beautiful thing. And I just think the integration of seeing all of that and then seeing the history of everything, it's really cool. I think more people should be interested in where we came from and why we are where we are, you know, and not be so afraid to embrace the past.
I really don't think that seeing funny things on TikTok is going to last as long as people want it to. But anyway, everybody, I think that's going to wrap up another Old, the New, and the Awesome. I am really looking forward to July's episode because I am very excited to rewatch a movie that is celebrating a milestone anniversary that I have really not watched in a very long time. I'm going to be watching Independence Day. I am so excited to finally rewatch this film. And yes, I will also watch the sequel because I did see the sequel in theaters and I actually did enjoy it to a certain degree. Was it as good as the first one? No, but I would like to get myself a peace of mind one more time. But anyway, everyone, on behalf of Kami and Stacy, it was a pleasure seeing you all again. We really hope that you enjoyed, and do not forget to hit that like button as well as leaving us a comment because we'd love to talk to you. And of course, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you are up to date with all of our latest content, and we will see you in the next one.
If you enjoyed the video you just watched, feel free to leave a comment. Also, feel free to subscribe if you want to be up to date with our latest videos. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you in the next one. Actions speak louder than words.